On the 8th of April 1998, during the 6th season of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, an episode would be aired that would fundamentally change fans' perspective on the Federation. Because in episode 18 of season 6, section 31 was first introduced to the Star Trek universe. It would become one of the most controversial additions of Deep Space Nine's entire run, for how it blatantly goes against the ideals of Gene Roddenberry's vision for Star Trek, and at the same time praised for how it reframes the entire series in an entirely different light, and according to showrunner Ira Steven Behr, would serve as the culmination of his examination of the idealistic utopia that Roddenberry had created. If you're not aware, Section 31, as introduced by this episode, is a clandestine organisation operating within the Federation that does the Federation's dirty work.
And what does Section 31 do, apart from kidnapping Starfleet officers?
We search out and identify potential dangers to the Federation.
And once identified,
we deal with them.
how?
Quietly.
Section 31 have no oversight and no liability. Starfleet will not confirm or deny their existence. Yet they claim to have existed since Starfleet's creation, a claim we know to be true thanks to Star Trek Enterprise. It's not hard, I think, to understand why the introduction of Section 31 was so controversial. It undermines everything we've been told about the Federation. It reframes the utopian vision of peace and cooperation as a lie maintained by murder and espionage.
What does that say about us? When push comes to shove, are we willing to sacrifice our principles in order to survive?
I wish I had an answer for you, Doctor.
To some people this makes sense, though. After all, every other civilization in Star Trek has a secret organisation. It would be weird and unrealistic if the Federation didn't have a secret agency.
Personally, I find it hard to believe they wouldn't. Every other great power has a unit like Section 31. The Romulans have the Tal Shiar. The Cardassians had the Obsidian Order.
You may have just noticed that these aren't just discussions being had about the show, these are the positions of characters within the show itself. Mike and Rich of Red Letter Media once described Deep Space Nine as the anti-Star Trek, because this kind of discussion is at the very core of Deep Space Nine. That was the whole idea of the show in the first place, to question and scrutinise the ideals of Star Trek. Episodes like The Maquis, Homefront, and the entire Dominion War are all about testing the Federation, and seeing how its idealism holds up under real stress tests. Deep Space Nine doesn't just throw these up for debate and move on though, it throws them up, explores both sides and then picks one, because no matter how bad it gets, no matter the dark things our characters do throughout the series, Deep Space Nine ultimately believes in Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek. Section 31 only appear in 3 episodes of Deep Space Nine, but their influence on the show and the shadow they cast across the rest of the franchise have altered the discussion around Star Trek to this day. What's most interesting then is that those 3 episodes do not leave the issue up in the air. They present one side, they present the other, and then they pick one, fully committing to one side of the debate. Section 31 is bad, actually. Let's drop Mr. Educational. Deep Space Nine is not subtle about condemning the actions of Section 31, which is why I find it absolutely fascinating that many people can't seem to grasp the very simple concept that Section 31 are the bad guys, including the people currently rating Star Trek. It's why I wanted to make this video, because to me, Section 31 is inarguably shown as inept, unjustified, and actively detrimental to the Federation. And yet, a huge amount of people, even people who claim to love Star Trek, will continue to argue that Section 31 is necessary to the Federation, which is utterly bizarre. Well, it's kind of bizarre. We'll get to that. The first episode featuring Section 31 is called Inquisition. Section 31 kidnapped Dr. Bashir, put him in a holodeck and attempt to figure out if he's a traitor to the Federation, by putting him through a grueling simulation and attempting to trick him into a confession.
Do you remember? I don't remember. Because it never happened.
As far as episodes go, it's a banger, but for our purposes, the only really relevant part is the last 10 minutes or so, when the ruse is up and Section 31 shows itself for the first time. Bashir and the Section 31 agent Sloan get into a long debate about the morality of Section 31, and at least in terms of the story being told this time, Sloan makes a pretty compelling case. Bashir is also open to bending the rules. He lied to get into Starfleet. These facts are enough for Bashir to lose the advantage this time. With this scene alone, it's understandable why why many people would see Section 31's point of view and agree with it. The story and the scene quite clearly establish that Sloan won the argument this time. However, to get the full picture, we need to read between the lines.
How many lives do you suppose you've saved in your medical career?
What has that got to do with anything?
Hundreds? Thousands? Do you suppose those people give a damn that you lied to get into Starfleet Medical? I doubt it. We deal with threats to the Federation that jeopardize its very survival. If you knew how many lives we've saved, I think you'd agree that the ends do justify the means. I'm not afraid of bending the rules every once in a while if the situation warrants it. And I don't think you are either.
Sloan is drawing a massive false equivalency here, and I don't blame Bashir for not picking up on that, because the poor guy only got an hour of sleep last night.
I believe we allowed you a full hour.
It's true that Bashir on many occasions bends or breaks the rules in order to save lives. It's another one of those core themes of Deep Space Nine. However, the difference between when Bashir does it and when Section 31 does it is accountability. When Bashir breaks the rules, he understands and accepts the punishment. Even if the punishment doesn't come to fruition or is resolved, he still operates with the understanding that breaking the rules will result in punishment, which is a rule for most characters in Star Trek. The very next episode is all about this. Sisko crosses that line and decides not to face the consequences, and we as an audience are left to question if that's okay with the episode's haunting last words.
Because I can live with it. I can live with it.
Section 31 crosses that line with every single operation. They don't report to anyone officially, they don't even exist. They operate with no understanding of accountability beyond what they think is right. It's true that Bashir had his genetic modifications to get into Starfleet, but we have to remember that Bashir was genetically modified as a child with absolutely no say in the matter. And when the truth came out, in exchange for staying in Starfleet, his father was sent to prison for the crime. Again, accountability. At this point, so soon after our introduction to Section 31, we don't know much about them, and our only source for them is one of their agents who's also trying to recruit Bashir through this debate.
I admit it takes exceptional people to do what we do. People who can sublimate their ambitions to the best interests of the Federation. People like you.
Me?
You have all the qualifications to be a very useful member of Section 31.
He says that Section 31 has saved countless lives, but we have no way to verify that. This mission, testing to see if Bashir was a spy, is the first Section 31 mission we've ever seen, and let's take a second to note that they were wrong about that. Bashir wasn't a spy. What else are they wrong about? Sloan is the least reliable source in the world when it comes to Section 31. Even if he wasn't trying to recruit Bashir, we can already assume he thinks Section 31 is correct and justified. He works for them. I don't like the term, "you just didn't get it," but if you took this episode as an attempt to explain the Star Trek universe, you just didn't get it. People far too often conflate darkness with more realistic, and to me that's just silly. Just because Deep Space Nine deals with more complex issues and more difficult morality tales, doesn't mean it's not a show about spaceships and laser guns. Deep Space Nine is not more realistic than Next Gen because Nog gets his leg blown off during wartime. This is getting away from the topic of this video a bit. The point is, Section 31 was not introduced to explain Star Trek, it was introduced as yet another test. The Maquis are used to explore how the Federation deals with defectors and people who don't agree with the idealism of the Federation. The Dominion are used to explore how the Federation deals with a foe who absolutely cannot be reasoned with, and eventually, how a peaceful organisation like Starfleet deals with the realities of war. Section 31 is used to explore how the Federation deals with a threat from within, an organisation that claims to be working for the Federation's goals despite going against everything it stands for. And let's continue that exploring if you don't mind. Inter Arma Enim Silent Legis, which is an incredibly annoying name for such a good episode, shows us in a much more direct way what Section 31 actually does. This episode is one of Star Trek's best spy thrillers, with an elaborate web of lies and deceit to be untangled over the course of the episode. You should go watch it.
Starfleet Intelligence should recruit you immediately.
What makes you think I'm not working for them already?
Somehow it wouldn't surprise me if half the people in this room turned out to be operatives.
To sum up, Sloan tricks Dr. Bashir into helping him get their spy into a higher level of the Romulan government by eliminating his competition, the friendly Senator Kretak. Once again, the show does a decent job of justifying this action, though this time through Bashir's off-the-books argument with Admiral Ross, who by this point Bashir has realised was working with Sloan. This time, however, it's much more apparent that Bashir wins the argument. It's true that having a high-level spy in the Romulan government is beneficial to the Federation.
But in any case, we have our mole. Working for us at the top levels of Romulan government. Good for us.
But Ross is wrong about Kretak.
She was on our side.
No, she wasn't. I told you before, Julian, she's a patriot. Which means if it serves the interest of the Romulans to negotiate a separate peace with the Dominion, Kretak would push that option.
If she was simply a patriot, she would never have helped Bashir the way she did. If the Romulans and the Federation had a real chance at peace, it was through her. And the show does very much imply that at this point, that is a possibility.
I'm asking you to put aside 3 centuries of mistrust between our peoples and help me stop a murder. Senator, if we can't reach out and bridge the gulf that is between us, if we can't trust each other, a man will die, and we will be partially responsible.
But instead, Sloan rekindled mistrust between the powers with his actions, and put a spy on the council instead of a peacemaker. You have to ask, how many times has this happened before? How many times has peace been possible? But Section 31 has sabotaged it with their selfish actions in the self-proclaimed interest of the Federation. This is not, as Sloan said last time, seeking out threats to the Federation and eliminating them. This is working in Section 31's own interest to get one of their spies into a greater position of power by stepping over any chance of real peace.
Enter Arma. Einem silent legis.
In time of war, the law falls silent. Cicero. So is that what we have become? A 24th century Rome, driven by nothing other than the certainty that Caesar can do no wrong!
Sloan and Bashir have an interesting conversation at the end of this episode.
Federation needs men like you, Doctor. Men of conscience, men of principle. Men who can sleep at night. You're also the reason Section 31 exists. Someone has to protect men like you from a universe that doesn't share your sense of right and wrong.
This is one of those lines that sounds convincing until you really think about it. Bashir didn't need saving. Nothing about this episode or this plot is about protecting men like Bashir. It was a strategic espionage move, and that's all. So why is he saying it then? Well, given that Deep Space Nine is actually good, unlike a lot of the other stuff I talk about, I'm going to start reading too much into this, because I think I've gained that right. Sloan desperately wants to convince Bashir to his way of thinking. I think the part about respecting Dr. Bashir is true, but he wants to prove that he can convert a good man like Bashir to his way of thinking. Because if he can convert a fully moral man like Dr. Bashir, then he must be right about Section 31, right? I wish I had more to say about this episode. Unfortunately, even though Section 31 is a much bigger part of the episode, most of the episode is just a fun spy thriller in Romulan land. So there isn't too much relevant to our discussion there. It is a really good episode though, and I still think you should watch it. Throughout the final episodes of Deep Space Nine, the Founders have contracted some kind of degenerative disease, including our resident grumpy police sergeant Odo. Who else could be behind it but Section 31, as revealed in our final DS9 episode, Extreme Measures?
We believe that they were responsible for infecting Odo in the first place.
What?
Now, things get dark in this episode, but can we all at least agree that genocide of an entire species via biochemical weapons is completely unjustifiable? If you don't agree to those terms, could you fuck right off, please? Wait a second, that's right! They released the biochemical weapon before the war even started! Yay! In this final episode, Bashir and O'Brien enter Sloan's mind to find the cure for the Founders virus. There's not too much more to it than that. It's mostly a buddy jaunt through dream space.
Nothing to worry about.
I wasn't worried.
There's some debate over whether Bashir was justified in kidnapping and mind-reading Sloan, but against trying to prevent a genocide that this guy is responsible for, I'm not exactly losing any sleep over it. Plus, He asked permission first.
They're also illegal in the Federation.
Oh, I hope you can appreciate the irony of that statement.
This is Section 31 cards fully on the table. Any idea that they believe in the Federation are completely lost. And to top off, not only is genocide completely unjustifiable from a moral standpoint, Section 31 was just wrong about this course of action in general. The Federation won the war. They won through cooperation with the Klingons, with the Romulans, and even with the Cardassians. The virus was completely unnecessary. If anything, the virus has an unintentional side effect of securing peace between the two powers so Odo can bring the cure to his people. And before you try to argue that that was Section 31's plan, no. Section 31 are not that smart. Plus, if it was their plan, Sloan would have just given Bashir the cure, probably gloating about it as he does so. They infected the Founders because they feared and distrusted them, because they don't believe in the principles of the Federation. Section 31 are not necessary to the Federation, they are a hindrance to it. If you're curious, this is why I don't quite agree with the argument that Section 31 ruins Gene Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek. If Section 31 was played completely straight, all of their actions completely beneficial to the Federation, then yes, I'd say that would be bad. When I first had Section 31 explained to me, that's what I was expecting and I was dreading it. But Deep Space Nine is better than that. Section 31 is never treated as a necessary evil, it's treated as a problem, a virus that will have to be removed if the Federation wants to move forward. A terrorist organisation using 200-year-old loopholes and a warped sense of moral duty to justify horrific actions. Section 31 are bad, but ultimately the Federation can survive a threat like Section 31, just like they can survive a threat like the Dominion. And that's all she wrote. Except, Section 31 is far too juicy story element to just ignore, so it's no surprise that future writers keep bringing them back, first in Enterprise, then in the Kelvin movies, and then in Star Trek Discovery. And that means we have to talk about it, because let's just say the moral easiness of Deep Space Nine has become a lot more complicated. Section 31 appears in 4 episodes total in Enterprise. It's pretty heavily hinted at that they were supposed to appear in more than that, but the show got cancelled, so oh well. Already we can see a shift in the depiction of Section 31. Far from the genocidal weirdos of Deep Space Nine, Section 31, as shown in Enterprise, is way more of a, shall we say, chaotic good organisation, by which I mean they actually help. During their first introduction, they kidnap Phlox and give him to the Klingons so he can find a cure for the virus that turns Klingons into humans with brown face paint.
Come on. I have nothing to say to you, human.
That sounds like
Klingon.
It's a good two-parter, I swear. Their stated reason for this is to help secure peace between the humans and Klingons and stabilize the Klingon Empire, which is a pretty noble goal, even if their methods are a bit needlessly evil. They inexplicably wear the same uniform 200 years in the past, but morally they're actually in the right direction this time, which is weird. They're still pretty inept, which is nice. Harris is completely fooled by the Klingon general.
You agreed that both our governments would benefit if the two of us worked together.
And you believed me.
But overall, this is a very different organisation than the one seen in DS9. What this is a more complicated approach to the same issue. When Section 31 is unarguably wrong, it's easy to see them as the bad guys, at least it should be. When they're technically right, however, it becomes a little bit harder to say they're the bad guys. Let's take a look at the situation, though, and how Section 31 absolutely did the wrong thing. Kidnapping Phlox was extremely silly. Phlox is a doctor. He would have helped cure a plague if you just asked him. As proven by the fact that he helps cure the plague anyway without much protest. Hiding the truth from Archer is also dumb. Had Archer known the truth, he wouldn't have flown Starfleet's most advanced starships directly into Klingon space and almost started a war. Now, given what the Klingon doctor says here...
Why didn't you simply ask for our help? Starfleet and Denobula would have provided you with all of the specialists you'd need.
You don't understand the Klingon way, Doctor. To ask for assistance would make us look weak in the eyes of our enemies. It could even incite rebellion.
There's an understandable secrecy to this mission, however keeping it secret from Enterprise was incredibly stupid. Everything would have gone a lot smoother if Section 31 just wasn't involved at all. Harris makes another small appearance in the show's finale. A group called Terra Prime is threatening to blow up Starfleet Command unless every alien leaves Earth. The crew of the Enterprise reach out for some information and Harris gives it over at a price. The price was being cancelled. Unfortunately, it's set up to a different story which never happened. There isn't too much we can say about this, except again, we can see that Section 31 are shown as at least being on the correct moral path. Making Section 31 less obviously malicious isn't necessarily a bad change. It allows Enterprise to flirt around the idea that just because an organisation like this is pointed in the right direction doesn't mean it's justified and necessary. The problem with moral grey areas is that people are stupid. I mean, if people watch Deep Space Nine and came up with the idea that Section 31 was absolutely necessary, then they've got no chance when the organisation's actually doing good things. We could also view this as the organisation getting more dark and dubious as the years go on, starting off with good morals and good intentions, but fading into more extremities as the centuries pass. In terms of lore, I'm willing to accept that, but in terms of what's being said by the inclusion in the story, it's definitely a lot more complicated. Speaking of which...
You are capable of some intricate moral gymnastics. And that's your job, right?
So I think everyone understands that Star Trek Discovery doesn't give a fuck about continuity, so we're just gonna ignore all the stuff that doesn't match. And trust me, there's a lot. I'm more interested in how Section 31 is used and portrayed in the story, not about how it doesn't match up to the timeline. Section 31, as depicted in Discovery, is an official Starfleet organisation run by the Admiralty Board and is also at least partially publicly known.
This isn't your everyday Federation espionage. What kind of organisation could pull that off?
This kind.
Section 31.
Section 31 also has a much larger role in Discovery than any of the other shows, being directly involved with most of the plot of Season 2. Which is, Look, don't ask me to explain the plot of Discovery Season 2. I can't. I don't think anybody can. Let's just take this point by point. So between seasons, they recruit the evil Empress from the Mirror Universe to become one of their top agents. She murders a room full of Klingons to save Ash Tyler and L'Rell, fucking hell. And then directly influences Klingon politics even more by telling L'Rell, at knife point, exactly what to do. After they fake his death, they recruit Ash Tyler into the organisation, and if you don't remember who that is, look, I don't blame you. He's the guy that used to be a Klingon, but they surgically made him a human and grafted the memories of a human into him to make him a sleeper agent. I think. And then he snapped Dr. Culber's neck. Don't worry, he got better. So, Section 31 is looking for Spock because he killed some scientists during his escape from a mental institute. But he didn't really kill them, he was framed. Framed by who? Section 31, obviously. Why? Stop asking stupid questions. Eventually, Michael Burnham finds Spock in a telepathy-proof cave under their house and hands him over to Section 31. They want to probe his brain for information about the red signals. Oh, and they've done everything they've done so far because an AI called Control that they built told them to, including recruit Ash Tyler for some reason.
Control values his skill set. We would like you to work on your recruitment speech.
Anyway, Burnham immediately rescues Spock with the help of Georgiou, who wants to advance her career.
That will make Leland look bad, which is good for me.
Or because she treats Burnham like a daughter.
No, the goodness of yours. I know so much more about you than you can imagine. But that's for another time.
Or because she's crazy. Take your pick. Anyway, forget all that shit about Spock. It's irrelevant. Turns out Michael Burnham's parents were scientists working for Section 31 to create time travel. Because they had heard that the Klingons were working on time travel. Her dad died, her mum's one of the two Red Angels, and Leland covered it up. They have a secret base protected by... blade mines?
Blade mines. They'll slice the hull like cheese.
No, I'm sorry, I can't. Blade mines? What's the purpose of blade mines? In what universe is a spinning blade more effective than a regular fucking mine? You know, we've got these bombs that can blow up half a starship, but we're gonna defend our secret base with buzzsaws. Oh, this show is so stupid. Anyway, remember that AI that controls Section 31 is actually taken over the base and killed all of Section 31's leadership and is controlling the Federation via holographs to make sure that it can get the information from a big magic orb so that it can become a full AI, which I guess it wasn't already? Leland becomes an AI sausage. The season ends with every single one of Section 31's ships failing to destroy the Enterprise and Discovery. But at this point, they're no longer controlled by Section 31, they're controlled by Control. So it's not really Section 31 that's doing any of this anymore. But anyway, Pike blames Section 31 for the incident, and Ash Tyler is told to rebuild the organization to be more transparent, aka setting up for that juicy spin-off show. So aside from the fact that Season 2 has a plot that's impossible to follow, this is pretty standard fare for Section 31, inept, shady for no reason, actively harmful to the Federation. But this time it's all massively different, because Section 31 is an official, recognised part of Starfleet now.
Section 31 may not be the shining beacon of righteous conduct you want it to be. They are a critical intelligence division, and we have more pressing priorities than debating Article 14 of Starfleet's charter. Nation building is never pretty. That is the unappetizing truth, and you know it.
This is not the same as when Sloan said the same thing back in DS9. Back then, he was using that reasoning to justify his genocidal terrorist organization. Cornwell is talking about an official department of Starfleet, and possibly more damning, Pike, the only Star Trek character in Discovery, ultimately agrees with her, even if he doesn't like it. Even if they're shown as dangerously inept, Discovery tells us that an organization that bends and breaks the rules, works in the shadows manipulating politics of other nations, and kidnaps and mind-reads Federation citizens is absolutely necessary and justified. Hey, did you know that often things in media, but especially things in Star Trek, are representative of things in the real world? Hey, it's time for this video to get way too real. Let's ask what it is that Section 31, this shadowy organisation that meddles in foreign affairs and spies on its citizens. It's the CIA. It's tampers in foreign affairs, spies on its citizens. It's the CIA. Star Trek, and especially Deep Space Nine, is a very politically charged piece of fiction. You don't have to look further than episodes like Far Beyond the Stars or Past Tense to see that. If you want an example of political parallels done badly, then watch my video on Star Trek Picard. Deep Space Nine is actually good at this. For an easy example, let's look at the Ferengi. The Ferengi are a part parody, part accurate portrayal of capitalism. They love money. Their government system is based on making money. They shame people who are bad at making money. They're atrociously sexist as well.
You work with your females, harm them, and force them to wear clothing.
They're pure capitalism. So when Rom starts to turn against this system, aka not caring about profit, respecting women, starting an illegal union, and quoting Karl fucking Marx, there's an unstated assumption that maybe we should consider doing that in the real world. Where governmental systems are based on making money, people are shamed if they can't make money, and our leaders are atrociously sexist.
Workers of the world, unite! You have nothing to lose but your chains.
Star Trek isn't good because it's subtle, okay? When Deep Space Nine says that Section 31, a shadowy organisation breaking all the rules for the supposed benefit of the Federation, is bad, there's an unstated assumption that maybe the shadowy organisation who breaks all the rules for the benefit of your own country is also bad. On the flip side, when Discovery tells us that the shadowy organisation breaking all the rules for the benefit of the Federation is necessary, there's an unstated assumption that the shadowy organisation breaking all the rules for the benefit of your country in the real world is necessary. So is this secretly a call-out post? Am I claiming that Star Trek Discovery is CIA propaganda now? Kinda? It's more complicated than that, unfortunately. As I made clear, Discovery still paints Section 31 as dangerously inept, so it's hard to argue that they're pro-CIA. But it's not so much that they're arguing that secret agencies are a net positive, they're arguing that it's a necessary evil. If they were on the same page as DS9, then the obvious conclusion to this story would be the shutdown of Section 31. But instead, it's to be reformed and given a whole show to explore. Yay! Unfortunately, Discovery has the same problem as Picard. Its messages and ideas are so jumbled that trying to get a coherent argument out of the show is almost impossible. Which is why I can't say definitively what the hell the show actually believes. It just does whatever it thinks is the coolest thing to do in any given episode. I think it's far more likely that they just took the name Section 31 because it's a thing people have heard of and used it without thinking of any of the ramifications of doing that. What I can shed a bit more light on is why this idea sticks with people so much. Why does Discovery pose this argument? Why do so many fans pose the argument that Section 31 is necessary? Well, believe it or not, there's fans of Star Trek who either don't notice how obviously political it is, or who simply ignore all the parts they disagree with. That's how we end up in a situation where people are arguing that putting a black woman in a leading role is making Star Trek political, or that Picard being about Brexit somehow makes it a disgrace to the franchise. If you're a fan of Star Trek who doesn't believe in the vision, maybe you see it as a utopian idealism or some other fancy way of saying bullshit, the idea of Section 31 validates that belief. It confirms the idea of Star Trek as a fantasy. Somebody has to do the dirty work, right? But it's just not true. Section 31 is an interesting story element because it brings up this exact discussion. But the Federation doesn't need Section 31. And neither do we. So I guess what I'm saying is, defund the CIA? Is that the point of this video? Oh, is this what Star Trek has become now? And my thought was, yes. Have you not been paying attention?
This is where it's been going since...
This is where it's been going for a while now.
And if you said something to me, I think last week or the week before, and you said it's super weird. We are theoretically in a Star Trek golden age.
Oh yeah.